a non-traditional path, but at least that's how I call it. But I would venture to guess that there's a lot of coaches that came up in the same way that I did, meaning, I didn't come up.
If it helped push the game a positive direction in the States, or everybody, welcome back to From the Field, Voices of Football. I'm here with Coach Shawn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
The first question I got for you is, can you tell us about your background in soccer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would call it a non-traditional path, but at least that's how I call it. But I would venture to guess that there's a lot of coaches that came up in the same way that I did, meaning, I didn't come up through high school or at the collegiate level. I get asked that question a lot, a little bit later, but it was more or less, I have two children. I have about to be, and then daughter is going into her 7th year. But my son, parents within, youth soccer, when they do that 5-6 years of age, so let's put our kid in soccer and see how that goes. And signed my son up, and we went to the first practice. Coach there, and the parents standing around, and my wife was like, "You're going to coach." I don't know what I'm doing, but I quickly figured, and then the rest is really history. So what started off as more of stance, the kids not having a coach or somebody that was going to be available to them, turned into a real passion for the sport. I think I always knew I wanted to coach a sport at some level.
Okay.
I just kind of always thought it would be maybe in the realm of what I grew up in, which was wrestling. But as it happens, football or soccer was the sport that my coaching hat fell on. And it truly has been a journey. So with that, post that point, I've been coaching at the grassroots level within our local club, YSA Ajax. My son only played for a few years. He pretty much phased out really quickly. He realized it was too much running for him, and it wasn't he wanted to continue to do. But my daughter really took. I don't know if that's because she got drug around of him playing, and I think she saw brother playing. She always wanted to play, that natural kind of younger sibling thing, and then she really just fell in love with the sport and took to it. So he phased out. I continued with learned naturally as they get older, the expectations start changing, the environment starts changing, parents start changing, score starts kept, and just get involved. So it's probably about 4 years in, I realized okay, I need to take up my level of the sport, and about managing sessions and managing games and development to another level. And I just started looking for self-education, whether that be on YouTube or books or podcast, you name it. I got into it, and really what I think one of the best gifts that no one told me about, and I found it on my own, was I stumbled across the U.S. Soccer Learning Center.
Okay.
And their page one day, they had a grassroots coaching course for $25 on them. It's just like their basic grassroots course. And what it does is it goes over their practice play, methodology. And that was the best in my early coaching career. That's $25 I ever spent. And I recommend it to any youth coach. Like nowadays, when I go and I volunteer at the facility, and when I'm walking around and I'm talking to coaches, I can see that they have a passion. I see them always out there, but you can tell they're struggling. I always pull them aside and like, hey, go take this course. It's $25. You'll thank me later. I promise. But that set off really the learning journey, if you will, for me on the U.S. soccer licensing path. But it made such a huge difference, and it really kind of instilled some confidence in me. Like, okay, this doesn't need to be as difficult as I think it needs. So that was huge, and again, so I totally recommend anybody that's sport and they're a little lost on how to run a session or what it should look like. Go to US Soccer Learning and take that $25 grassroots course and so yeah, and then as that progressed, my daughter would typically 3 different seasons. We would have our fall season, which is our normal rec season, and then we would have which the mini season was comprised of only teams that played in the fall. So you had to have played out. So it was like a recreational league. So it was a little bit more intense, not quite competitive, but step up because everybody had to try out. So we would do the mini season, and then we would do that, and then it was about 2 years ago. After we got done with, I remember telling my wife, like, Madison's really, our teammates, they've really kind of, the record side of things, and we make that jump to competitive, and we did. First year in competitive, I was an assistant coach, and it's definitely a learning environment. I was super thankful to be able to ride in that co-chair seat and see the competitive world from the assistant coach's chair, not just from on the field, but the parent environment, the whole, like what I would call, or what I like to call, the performance management environment, like all the pitfalls that await for a coach in that, because it's certainly not easy to manage through. And I watched our coach kind of struggle through some of those areas. And so I was, super thankful for him to give me that opportunity, kind of learn from him on the field stuff, but then also be able to sit back and kind of watch, like, okay, here's, if I were in his shoes, or if I had the team, this is how I'd go about handling the business and handling the situations. And there's never going to be a perfect scenario, but it was certainly a blessing to be able to do that. And then now I find myself in that head coaching chair for this next season. So yeah, I mean, that's what the journey's been. Along the way, I've continued my licensing path. So I have, there was another grassroots course that I did for like the 9v9 game. And then I also did my 9v9 in-person license, my 11v11 in-person license, which those are requirements for the D license. Mm-hmm. So you have to have those courses before you go and take your D license, which I completed early this year. So I really enjoyed that course. And, I think part of the content, at least from my perspective, is good, but if you search online and you go through YouTube videos or Instagram, you'll find some characters that, have really strong opinions about US soccer licensing, and, that it's maybe not as good as, whatever else is out there, UEFA or whatever the case may be. But, I didn't have that experience so much, at least, especially on my D license. I think a lot of those courses, obviously the content's the same, but I think what really makes the courses are the instructors. Because in my 9v9 and my 11v11, how it was delivered, but I instructors, not younger in age, but younger side of things. They were newer instructors, so I think they were a coach, right? You're gonna. So those, I'm not gonna sit here and say I got a lot out of, but the D lessons, we had an instructor. She had been around being an instructor for a while with US Soccer. She's been a coach for 30 years. I mean, she just had so much wisdom, and she knew how to manage the room. She knew how to manage the coaches. She knew how to get her message across. She knew what content was important that we needed to take away from us. So I was really lucky to have an instructor, and I enjoyed that class. So again, I would encourage just to go through the U.S. license. Again, the content might be a roll of a dice instructor you get, and hopefully across the fingers you get a good learning experience. But I'm certainly thankful that I went through it, and I'm applying a lot of those principles even today.
Right.
Because the D license really focuses on how to design sessions, not just from pen and paper, but in terms of beginning to end, all the way through the session, making sure that your activities build on top of one another, making them game like as much as you can, planning for, I was talking with the coach the other day, and they're like, well, how do you handle when, some of your numbers don't show up? Because I have a roster of 17, and what happens if only 14 show up? Say, well, you plan for that, right? Like when you plan your session, you try to account like, okay, if my numbers change, this is how I'm gonna run the activity versus if I had my full numbers, things like that. So all these little things that you normally don't, if you don't go through this stuff, maybe you don't always think of right out of the gate. And I can say that I didn't always used to think about that stuff. And I would arrive to a session, and all of a sudden, I got 3 players short, and I'm like, oh crap, what am I going to do? And those are things I think about now. And, I plan my sessions the weekend before the week, just to make sure I got everything dialed in. And that gives me a sense of comfort going into the week that, we're ready to go and we know what we're going to cover off. And, so yeah, I think that's the value of taking those licenses, is that, just like any other piece of education, you can learn it, but it's what you do with it and how you apply it. And I certainly make sure that I apply it at every chance I get. So.
Right. No, and I don't know if it like I'm doing the D license right now. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I've enjoyed or like is they have like the whole practice sessions there. Like you don't have to go and do your own. Like you just have like they have them there for you. And they work great because like I use them for my own team, and I can see the improvements they're doing just from their own practice sessions that they have for you set up already.
You're correct. And I think, the D license really focuses more on 99 and below. So I wasn't really able to use some of those sessions because I have 11 v
Okay.
11 squad. But you're right. There's definitely a lot of sessions in there. And but what I do use is, and I don't know how far along you are in there, but there's the attacking fundamental guide, and then there's the defensive fundamental guide where it
Hmm.
talks about the player actions and the attributes that you're looking for. I still use that when I'm planning my sessions today. So, when I'm going through, last week I did a whole defensive install. I had 3 practices, and we did pressure cover balance on day 1 and defending with the back 4 on day 2, and then we did a review on day 3. And when I built out those sessions, I referenced my guides to making sure I was getting the right player actions, the key words that I wanted to hit on, to make sure that it was easy to translate the messaging to the team, and keep me honest too while I'm in the session, of not far off course of different verbiage or things like that. Because I actually, my session, I keep it in my pocket. That way I can refer to it in the session, make sure, like if I have a mental block or what have you, I refer back to that. Or while the girls are doing a water break, I just kind of look at my notes real quick and making sure that, okay, because, and you'll learn going through the D license, when you film, because they have you film one of your sessions. So I don't know if you've done that yet. And, just like reviewing game tape, that's something I'll take with me. I will film one of our practice sessions here or there, one to review, how are the girls performing, but then two, audit my own coaching, style. Because, I found when I turned in my license video, I thought I ran a really good session. It was only like a 10-minute session. And I did, but there was things that popped up just in that 10-minute clip. It's like, oh wow, I kept saying that one thing, or I wasn't really specific when I was giving praise, or saying things like, oh, great job, but it's, it should be more like, hey, that was a great angle, or that was a great pass, or way to find space, specific praise,
Hmm.
so that way, the player knew what it was that you were happy about. Little deep, um, the D course um, helped make that realization, it enforced that, which I think is is huge, right? Because if you don't get that recognize that that's what you should be doing, then how are you going to improve as a coach? So
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go back to the beginning a little bit. Okay, so you mentioned that you didn't do soccer, right? But you have other athletic in your background, wrestling, football, jiu-jitsu, triathlon, and cycling, right?
yep.
How have all these experiences shaped your approach to coaching soccer?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in sport my whole entire life, and probably the easiest translation to talk about is just the work ethic, the amount of repetition, the basics that's required to excel in craft. I'll use wrestling as an example. You know, there's hundreds of different techniques and moves that you can do throughout of the match, whether it's on the offside or even on the defensive side. From takedown to defending takedowns, pins and locks, different styles of things. But ultimately, the people that excel and the ones that are really good do two or three things really well, and they do the basics extremely well, and they focus on those things over and over and over and over again. And that translates directly, to soccer, where I see it within my team right now, or I see a lot of coaches, they move off on things too quickly because they feel like they gotta teach all these different things and they gotta teach all these different techniques. But at the end of the day, you can't make a simple pass with the right amount of weight, and you can't receive a pass with the right amount of touch. Uh, and if you can't just make a simple shot or when to, like, the rest really doesn't matter. I see some coaches, oh, I want to have a possession based system and want to ping the ball on like Man City, and I want to be at the youth level. And it's like, well, if they can't string together three passes, that's never going to happen, right? You're part ahead of the horse. So it's about basics, and focusing on those basics. I think where it gets hard as a coach, when you feel like you're doing some of the same over and over again, you kind of get this teaching something new, and you're not doing your job. And I think that's a trap, that's misguided. And I think anybody that's played any kind of sport, higher level or even very competitive level, they know basics matter, and you focus in on the basic. And they also know that the amount of work you put into it, I always like to call it deposit. As much as you deposit into the bank is what you're going to be able to withdraw on game. And through whether through jujitsu and especially triathlon and cycling in my later years, it is 100% and is what you get at, and that leads to the football field. We have some only show up to the practice sessions the 2 times a week, and if that's all that's scheduled and that's what you do, I mean that's fine. Yes, you are going to get better over the course of the year, but if you're a player who outside of those 2 sessions is also getting maybe an individual training session in with a trainer, and then they're putting in 15 to 30 minutes at home on the ball or on the wall, see their growth grow versus that player who's only showing up to 2 sessions a week. And those are the things that really translate. Those are the things I try to bring through from my own experience, through sport, and then and across the board. um, and then the other thing is, from like a wrestling standpoint, granted, a wrestling match is very short in duration compared to a minute soccer match, but it's very fluid game. It's a fluid sport, meaning that you'll be thinking 2 to 3 moves ahead. And that's so much appreciate soccer. And I think this is something that the casual fan doesn't quite understand, or the parent for that matter. I've even heard parents like, "Why aren't you coaching from the sidelines?" I don't think you realize how like really effective that is. But once the players are on the field, as a coach, like outside of the people that are next to you, what side of the pitch you're on, you could be, you're 2, you're 10, and you're 7. If you're on that side of the pitch, you might be able to get some communication out to them, or maybe get some communication to the subs. but you're not going to be able to talk to the whole unit and say, hey, look, we need to stop doing this and we need to focus on this. It's a very fluid sport. And the players have to learn how to make decisions on their own and problem solve on their own on the game, during the game, through the fly of the game, based on what the opponent is giving them or not giving them. Wrestling, same way, and I think this is, I'm going to kind of take it to where we started. This is why the practice play methodology at the grassroots level was a danger for me when I was level, because it gets the game back to the kids. It lets them play more and natural attrition, figuring things out on their own. The only way that you can figure those experiences out and out how to learn how to is by providing an environment to them, and then making a coaching point, constantly giving them an environment to fail, learn, and then rinse and repeat. Because you can draw up plan A and plan board, on your build out, but once that falls apart, then what? You can't go back out on the field and tell them, okay, reset, try again. No, in the game, you got to figure it out. So those are some of the things that I did translate, from my sporting background, to and the other thing too is sometimes, and this came up in we went around and did the room, and the instructor asked us to talk about our playing career, and obviously I said, well, I didn't have one, and I think I was the only one in the course that didn't have that playing career. But everybody in that course, I think their playing career was the extent of high school and maybe a JUCO level. Soccer was probably the highest level. And they were all really surprised. And I kind of told them, I looked at them and I was like, well, what do you do for a living? And one guy's like, well, I'm a firefighter. I'm like, okay, well, did you do firefighting in high school? Like, okay, well, do you consider a subject matter expert in your field? Like, okay, I mean, this idea that you had to have played high school, some level of college to be is not in reality. And honestly, if from a U.S., if you want to continue, I think this is one of the biggest lack of good coaching, and it's some of that mindset out there that I think steers coaches away from trying to get involved or taking it more serious or getting on a learning journey to figure this out. Is this idea that you had to have played the game at some high level to be an effective user, which is it's ridiculous. I've seen a lot of people already that played the game and they coach their way out of a paper bag. They can't lead a session, and I even saw some of that in the decoy. These struggled going through a very basic non-game form activity, and it's in them for getting the education, but just being played doesn't equal I'm going to be a coach. So yeah, it's one of those things. I recognize it as a limiter, but through education and continuous learning, which is daily for me, I build up my confidence in that way. And yeah, every once in a while, I think there's that imposter syndrome kind of sneaks in, but I think anybody that has a passion for learning and wanting to improve, that's okay. That's healthy because it keeps you honest. It keeps you accountable of wanting to continue to improve, which is what I'm continue to do. So once I'm full for the C license, I'm going after because the C license is more geared to 11v11. So I think I'll run that.
A lot of the professional coaches, like Jose Mourinho, didn't play professional ball. So there's a lot of examples where you don't have to play at a very high level to become a good coach. And I agree with you. I didn't play myself at a high level. I couldn't even play. So I only play street soccer. So
yeah. And look, I mean, that doesn't mean even now I don't want to play. Like there's a just for kick pickup game at our club that over these next, our club's about to go on a 3-week break, but I intend on getting out there on the pitch. And, if I have time to find a over 40 league where I'm not going to, break myself for running too much. I still want, that doesn't mean I don't want to learn even from a playing standpoint. Like I truly enjoy the game. And so I will. And there's times where, when I go and sometimes I'll take my daughter and we'll go train individually. I thoroughly enjoy doing the activities with her because it helps me kind of demonstrate, okay, that's a little bit harder than than it looks. And so I think that's where the value is of running yourself through the paces from a coaching standpoint. And then you realize, okay, this isn't as easy as it looks, and maybe I need to change how I say this, or maybe I need to change my expectations of the demand on the player. So I do think there's certainly value in playing. And to that end, the minute I found out I was getting the head coaching job for this competitive team I had right now, you know, one of my goals, because I'm coaching youth girls, and when I look around our club, and I know it's an initiative of theirs too, but there's just not a lot of female coaches. So one of my goals, like as me as a coach, was try and develop a female coach or bring someone on staff that, that's, female, that one, that the players can relate to, because there's only just so much I can relate to them on. I mean, these are girls that are 12 years old, 13 years old. They're going to be going through a very different, period of their life right now that I just simply can't relate to them on. So it was really important to me to try and find, a female assistant. One, just because, again, I think it's, we need more female coaches, on the female side of the game. And then two, I just, for my own sake, I felt like it was needed to be able to really connect and provide an environment for the players that they feel comfortable and safe in. Because, it's always better when we can look to, a role model that's very similar to us. And then I also was hopeful to find someone who played. And I happened to knew that there was, one of the coaches I had seen at the rec level, that her daughter were going to be coming out to tryouts, and they were going to be playing, and we had already kind of seen her on the field. The daughter was good enough, and that was my first call I made. Was as soon as I found out, I was like, hey, I know you're coming to tryouts, and you guys make the team. Are you interested in coaching? And so we had set up another call, and I went over my whole season plan, and philosophy, and how stuff, and was very fortunate to have her accept, as a coach, and then she grew up in the game, and so that helps now. So now I do have that assistant coach who played, and the good news is she actually came up through Ajax program here in locally, so she's an alum of the club, and she played at level, she did ODP, all things. So now that gives me a little sense of comfort, and then I've even asked, well, what do you need of me? And I'm like, look, so when there's aspects that you think need to be called or through the session, that's your moment to shine. You need me to stop the session and go over a technical point or detail or what have you. That you have free reign to jump in at any time to hit those points home. So that was huge for me to be able to make that recruit. And if she had said no, I was already like, okay, I'm going to go to our local JC and see if any of the the junior girls are interested in coaching over that had that playing experience, but that at the same time somebody that the girls can relate to on a level that I just simply. So me, and believe for myself, I was able to make that. So too, it's just a process. You always want to bring people on that are better than you in some ways. That's just part of being a really good performance environment is bringing in and help lift everybody else around you.
So you mentioned that I think this is like your first season as a competitive coach, right? You used to do rec. How do you what strategies do you use to ensure each player's individual development from
Yep.
rec to competitive?
Oh, great question. And again, I'm going to attribute my D license experience to answer this. So when we were going through the D license, and I went through my course, it was January through March of this year. And one of the in-person weekends, we got on the topic of development, and we were talking about it. And one of the coaches from the clubs, I think it was the hosting club, they talked about doing individual development plans. And And I thought that was great. And I was like, yeah, I think that's awesome. I don't know if our club does that. And, I know our current coach isn't doing that. And so we had a discussion about it, and they actually have like a form that they used. And really what it was, it's an old US soccer form that is on an Excel sheet and it has a grading scale of 1 to 5. And, there's certain technical attributes and then tactical attributes on the player. And, you rate them 1 through 5, 1 being poor and 5 being high. And so I was like, hey, can you drop that, that form into the chat so that way we all have access to it. And they did. And I remember as the assistant coach, I went through and I completed the whole form for our entire team. And I sent it to our coach. I'm like, hey, here you go. And then I even sent it to the OC. I was like, hey, do we do something like, no, current, but we should. A lot of work, right? I mean, it took me many hours, it's like anything else, what you put is what you get out. And, I imagine this is what teachers feel like, having to grade papers. And that's what I found myself. I was like, oh, this won't be hard. And then like 4 hours later, I only gone through 3 players. I'm like, okay, this is going to take some time. Um, but I accomplished it and sent them off, and head coach didn't do anything with it, which is fine. Everybody wants to do the things that they are. But the minute I found out I was going to be the coach, I immediately, and probably in retrospect, I probably should have waited a week or two because there was some sensitivity of when the old head coach was leaving. There's that transition period of and then I was coming on, and there were some parents that were still kind of a little shocked by everything that was going on. But the first thing I did, like literally that night, was like, hey, I just put out a sign up sheet for the week. I have, individual development plans that I want to go over with all the players, and then it'll give us a chance to talk, coach, parent, and player about where I see, your player today, and then a little bit about how, I'm going to approach the next season. And because the way that transition happened, it like literally happened on a Sunday. We were moving into tryouts that week. So
Oh wow.
I didn't have a whole lot of time, sorry, it was 1 week later we were going into tryouts. I didn't have a lot of time to get in front of my current team before the tryout period. So I really wanted to, one, get in front of them and kind of go over like how I assess their player, how I, see the things that they're doing well, the things that they need to work on, and kind of give them a sense of confidence of like, look, this is the kind of level of detail that I'm going to be putting towards your player to hope, to kind of settle their nerves down. If they were wanting to come back the next season and they were unsure about me as a head coach. Obviously, they had seen me around as an assistant coach. They knew I was out there. They knew I was dedicated to being a part of the team. But, head coach is completely different than assistant
Mhm.
coach. So I actually did that the first week. And, it was a real interesting experience. It was, for the most part, I would say 80% was well received. 20%, and that 20% didn't even want to meet for various reasons, which was fine. And so I think at that level, filling out that form and having that conversation is very important to have. And no different than in the workplace, right? If you're a good manager in the workplace, you're having regular one-on-ones with your employees, you're having quarterly reviews with your, making sure like on task, are they moving through career as they want to progress, the daily stuff. you know, as a coach, we owe that players on the individual side, right? It's not enough just to show up to this and then not give them any feedback on how their development's going, especially at the level, and the parents vested interest, right? Because they're paying and it's not cheap, right? So I think as coaches, we also owe it to the parents to say, hey, look, this, I see your child progressing. This is, things are doing well. And the only way you can have that conversation is through some structure. So, and I'm going to continue this in my parent meeting a week ago. I will do it, semi-annually. We will have a full sit down and go over the same individual player form. Now, what I'm going to do different now that it's my team in full is the form that I filled out is very subjective, and which is fine, however, whenever you're doing subjective ratings, it's really hard to remove the emotion out of it. And you might say a particular thing about a player that what they're not doing well, and that may not be the same perception from their end, or especially the parent end, right? I remember I got one comment from a parent that's like, well, they do that, but sometimes the players aren't always okay. Well, fair point, and that may be correct. Um, but that pitfall of this type of individual development plan is again very subjective. I get, counter arguments, and that's fine to have a healthy discussion. So it actually, it just showed up. I ordered the trace camera system, and I want to be able to tie video analysis to these
Okay.
individual development plan, because that just, again, it completely removes the emotion out of it. It makes it, it's very black and white at that point. It's like, look, here are the things I think you need to work on. And here's the, video evidence of the game scenarios where it's showing through not just once or twice, but a couple different times. And then at that point, right, like it's on tape, right? So there's no back and forth, there's no arguing. It's very simple. And really, hopefully, if I've done, when we get to that point, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? It should be, we should know by that point. Um, and we'll see. I mean, the reason why I chose the trace and the camera is one, you know, the barrier to entry was less than that of a VO. But two, at least their marketing ploy, which was good. It got me hooked. But it helps curate individual highlights for the players, so you can really focus in on players and create files for the players. So if I want to have a talk, with with a certain player on my team, I can just pull up that number through Trace, and I have some video highlights of that player to kind of go through. Okay, here's some things I wanted to show you from last week's game. So that that's how I'm going to be approaching the individual development plan. We will have the subjective side of it, but I'm going to tie in the video analysis to it. Knowing that that's no easy task, right? Because again, I talked about how much work it is just to fill out the form. Well, now I'm adding video analysis on top of it. But if you want to be a good coach, you can't just coach the team. You have to coach the individuals. And especially again at this age, 13, 14, 15, the growth period is huge for them right now. And there's so much opportunity to continue to grow. So it's on us to help them on that journey. And again, you asked earlier, like, what are some things that, I translated from my playing experience to this? And video analysis is one of them. I was fortunate enough to have, parents that had a video camera of me when I was wrestling, and I would go home and I would watch the tape and I'd be like, ah, darn it, I screwed up here, I screwed up there, I missed this, I missed that. Video analysis is huge, and so to be able to help take the time to go over that with the players and parents. If you're not doing that today, I think you're just missing out, especially at the competitive level.
Right. Now, completely agree. Yeah. That video analysis is a lot of very helpful nowadays. So, reflecting on your recent success with the 2011 girls team, what was the highlight of the season? And what do you believe were the key factors in winning the tournament in San Diego?
Yeah, so Coach Teo, who was the head coach at that time, I got to give him credit. That first half of the season, if I take anything away from how he managed the team, and some of the coaching points that he really focused on, he had two things that he was really big on. Um, One was he uses this word a lot, which is culture. So he went out of his way, above and beyond, making sure that he was having an environment that the girls enjoyed. So I think that was an attributor to that success leading into that tournament. Down in San Diego, and we're in Central California, so that's a trip for us, right? It takes about 7 hours to get down there, and we did book in that with Disneyland, so it was a really fun atmosphere, I think, for the girls to make that trip down there and then go and complete. But it was that moment leading into December, I think, was a culmination of his hard work of to be working on all cylinders, and it's not easy to do because so of the season. And and tactically, I think what he was trying to achieve really came through in that tournament. He really, style the system, building out from the back was very important to him. and the team was very able to successfully, move through that end. So, kudos to him, all around on that success. And then the players, obviously, they have to show up and they have to do the work, and they did. And it was just a really good moment for the team, for the players, and then for Coach Teo to have that. It was that was definitely the highlight of the season, no doubt about it. Because and then if we're being honest, the second half of the season, not so much, right? We didn't have the same kind of tournament success, and we didn't have the same league success. We were in a higher league, and then just some things again, as much as you tried on the culture side of things, I think there was some things off the field that whether it's in the parent community or even in the player section that kind of went awry. And I'm not putting that on any one person, but it's just the nature of having a lot of personalities, within a team. And things just it's a roller coaster. A season
Right.
is rarely just a straight path. It's a roller coaster of emotions, events, and activities, different things that go on. And it just kind of went a different direction in the second half. But first half of the season, he did a lot of good things that I hope to try and carry on. I won't be able to do it exactly like he did. We have different styles, but again, try to surround yourself with people that help pick you up in areas that you're deficient in. My assistant coach really loves. I love the team bonding too. I just don't have that creative or even that bubbly kind of mindset to be I just don't. I'm generally like a more serious guy. I like to
Mhm.
have fun, but I just come across a little bit more serious. It's a little bit harder for me to be authentic, like, getting, to all that stuff. So when I try to act like that, it doesn't come across as genuine. Uh, I, my assistant coach and my team manager, they'll certainly pick me up in those areas. And we already have team bonding activities planned in July. We have some other ideas for later in the year to help, keep the atmosphere light for the girls to continue to grow fun. So yeah, it's fun. Really looking forward to next season.
Right. So you mentioned like you're not a very you're a more serious guy, right? So that's kind of challenging, and you've been doing this for over 10 years. Over the course of your coaching journey, what do you think's been the biggest challenge you faced, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Coaching specifically, um, you know, with soccer, I think the biggest has been the learning process.
Yeah.
And I think this is, as much as I said, earlier, you didn't have to play the game, but that is the benefit of playing the game or growing up in the game is,
Okay.
there's some things that you just inherently know that maybe a new coach doesn't know coming out of the gate. So that's been the biggest challenge, right? Is just trying to get caught up from a tactical perspective, and then also from a technical perspective. What's Where's the value of working on certain things versus other things? Earlier in my coaching career, I had that typical American coach, kids standing in lines, kicking a ball back and forth like nothing. It wasn't good soccer, and I admit that. Versus the sessions I run today, much more fluid, much more game-like. I'm trying to, get the ball rolling as much as I can. I don't like lines. I hate lines. I get anxiety when I have, players standing in line for more than 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah.
And then still the tactical side, right? Like I mentioned earlier, soccer, this is why I really enjoy it. Soccer is a very fluid game, and our work as coaches comes through on game day, just like the players. Their work as players comes through on game day, and I think more so in soccer than most sports because again, we're so limited on what we can impact on game.
Yep.
They're out there 5 minutes, and you're going to find out real quickly if what you've been working on is. And that doesn't mean wins and losses. You'll just see it right away. This, the opponent always has a say in that matter, and it can vary wildly, like who you're next. So you can lose and see a very effective team that you worked on coming through. So you can't always look at the scores. the net result of, did I fail or not? You have to see it through the player actions. Were we combining? Were we building out? Were we making that extra run in the final third? Were we doing the little things that we were working on and being creative on the ball to, try and get some success? Like those things, when they start showing through, then okay, it's working. It's what we're doing is working. It's coming through. There is a process to it. But that's certainly been the biggest challenge, and still to this day it is. And that's why I'm trying to be as much of a sponge as I can. That's why I want to go after the C license. I don't know if you've ever used the Coach's Voice Academy. I'm constantly on there. I mean, that's my Netflix. Football DNA is another resource that I use. I'm constantly in there and looking for ideas and tactics and things that I need to work on, things that I can bring through and practice. Because, those are, you know, creating that player environment for there to grow in is huge. And that's, I want the players to be successful. So I know it's on me I can't rest on learning. I have to continue to learn. And then
No,
the other part,
completely agree with you
um,
there.
yeah, and then the other part, and I don't, it's a challenge in the sense that, it's never going to go away. But I think it's something that it's a strength of mine, but I recognize it's always going to be a challenge. And that's parents. Parents have a lot of investment in what's going on. And so I don't want to come across in this interview that, parents are evil or they're the bad guy. They're not. And I think that's a misconception that a lot of coaches have. And it's an easy trap for them to fall in that, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just this crazy parents. No, that's not it. Right. And I think this was even more helpful for me last year, sitting in that assistant coach chair, kind of recognizing some of the things that were happening in the background and on the peripheral. The reality is, they're the ones that are getting their player from point A to point B. They're the ones, whether that's for practice or the tournament, and they have other kids and they have other things going on in their household. So yeah, I mean, they have an expectation. They have a vested interest. And it's on us coaches to give them a sense of calm that we have their kids' best interest. We have their best interest as parents, and we're doing the best we can to make sure that they're getting value for what they're spending, and then the time that they're spending too. It's not just money; it's time. And I know you're a coach, and I know you coach your kids too. So just even as from a parent perspective, there's a lot going on there. And so I think for us as coaches, it's always going to be a challenge. It's never going to go away. So you have to accept that challenge early, and you have to have a way of how you're going to go about doing that. And you're going to fail. That's the other thing too. Like you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. And that's something I consistently battle with because I want to make everybody happy. And that's the standard I should hold myself to. But the reality is we can't. But if your process is good and you're transparent about what you're trying to achieve and you're keeping lines of communication open, that's all you can do is control the controllables and then hope for the best on the outcome, and trust the process. So those are, those are probably the two biggest challenges. So
Yeah, no, I think you just gotta like communicate a lot with the parents, keep them in the loop of what's going on. And I think that will put down the problem with the parents many times. There's still some problems with parents, but I think that's mainly one of the main problems, like communication.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, communication's huge, right? Whether it's in the
Hmm.
workplace, and I know we talked a little bit about this, in our chats going back and forth. I had called out like 20 years of management, in the professional environment, and again, I think it's important because I've seen some coaches, they just simply don't know how to manage situations or people, or they don't know how to communicate effectively, and so I consider that a strength of mine. I can be very direct, but I'm very open. I'm very honest. I try to be as consistent as I can in my communication style and method, both with the parents and players, because I think that's hugely important. And it really sets the tone for how the environment's going to go. Because parents, they don't want to be left in the dark. They don't want to be left guessing like, well, what's he doing this week, or why are they doing this, or why are they doing that? The minute they start asking all those questions, you're going to be, you're going to be very reactive as a coach. You're going to be on the back foot trying to get them caught up when you do get stopped and they start asking you those questions. So the more you can get out in front of it, I think the better you can. And like one of the examples, when I was coaching mini season in our program, um, the way the mini season program, the part of the league that we were in, the league ran team made coaches and parents be on the same sideline. Whereas
Oh.
traditionally, parents are on one sideline and the coaches
Mm-hmm.
and team are on the other sideline. Uh, I actually loved that experience because not only did I get to manage my parents, being like, hey, stop telling them to send it, stop telling them to boot it, stop telling them to kick it. And I had no problem telling a parent not to do that. I just walk over like, just stop. But then also, when I had my halftime speech or even my pregame or postgame, talk, they got to hear what I was telling their players. And I clean to hide, so there's no insecurities on my part on what I'm saying, but being able to hear the messages I'm trying across to the player, them being able to hear or have a little bit of how I'm interacting with their child, during the game when they come off the field or even post game, went a long way of instilling trust in the parents. Like, okay, he has it, he got it. I don't need to be shouting at my kid from the sideline or providing instruction. Or sometimes, I'm not going to say it was always cream. It a dad or that played the game. It's like, well, why are you this way, or why are you saying it this way? And but then we would have that conversation. And maybe we'd agree to disagree, but more often than not, we'd come to a common ground. So that was that. I really appreciated that experience, and it proved positive to me. Showed early on, like having that open communication about methodology, tactics, how you're interacting with the players, and communications work. It absolutely works. But it's not for every coach, and I'm not going to tell every coach that that's how you should go about your business.
Right.
Because some coaches truly believe like, no, my job's to coach. I don't need to explain to the parents, what my tactics are or how I think about that. And to each his own. It, uh, for me, I feel like that's the way. But
Yeah, no, like I said, you just gotta keep the parents in the loop, let them know, why are you doing it? Not completely everything, but at least keep them in the loop, That's my opinion
yeah,
as well.
great.
So I don't know if you know, the U20 Women's World Cup will be this year, and I know you're coaching the girls team, right?
Hmm.
The US national team has been a powerhouse in international soccer, right? What lessons can you learn from their success can you apply to youth coaching?
From the U.S. women's national team,
Hmm.
the youth coaching, very, not 100% certain, to be honest. I'm not sure how to that question right out of the gate. Um, but I think what I'll do is I'll not necessarily punt entirely on the question. I'll go to a recent experience that I got to be a part of. So, um, Team First Academy
Hmm.
came to our club, and Team First Academy was a academy formed by Christine Lilly, Tish Venturini, and Mia Hamm. So all US women national team players.
Right.
And obviously Mia Hamm is Tish Venturina and Christine Lee. They're icons of women's sport, and you know Mia Hamm really kind of she was the Alex Morgan before Alex Morgan, or now before Sophia Smith, like that. Mia Hamm was one of those star female players. So they did a camp here at our local club, a camp, and just being able to have relatable role models for the players to see like, wow, that's something that could be in store for me. They always have to dream big. The reality is that less than 1% are going to make that level, but to have that connection, have that possibility, to have that dream, to be able to chase after that is huge. So I think, for my daughter and her experience, that she didn't know who Mia Hamm was out of the gate, and I had to make that same analogy. She was Alex Morgan before Alex Morgan. I told her, just go on TikTok and search Mia Hamm. Just go on TikTok and do that for me, and you'll quickly who we're talking about. And she did. So, and then when she got to the end, uh, she was a bit starstruck, but I have no doubt it's going to be a core memory for her. It has like a little trophy case upstairs that they all sign, and the picture took with all of them, and something that's gonna stick with her. Um, you know, kind of bookend this answer with what's coming up this summer. Between you got Copa America, and then you got the Olympics that are coming up too, and the U.S. women's national team on that, and chasing gold. I think it's huge for our younger players, especially at my age group, right? The 11 age group, 13-year-old, the 11v11 game. Some type of assignment for them to watch their position, come back with certain things. But it should provide, a sense of pride or value, like, oh wow, this is what it looks like at that level. This is somebody, potentially relate to someday. You know, and that's part of the development process too, right? Is seeing what it looks like at that level. And the girls' game is huge, right? It's a game that continues to grow, both on the professional level, and then obviously at the World Cup and the Olympic level. Especially in America. I mean, you can make a case that the women's national team has done more for U.S. soccer than the men's have. So it's and I think we'll continue to see that. Obviously, they struggled in the last World Cup, but we'll see if they can, with the new coaching change, if they can turn. And I hope they do. Like we all should, right? It makes a huge impact, right? Like the next few years for American soccer is going to be fantastic, right? Obviously we have the Olympics, and we expect the women to do well, and then hopefully the men. And then in a couple years' time, we're going to have the men's World Cup here, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth, continued growth. I think the game obviously has been growing, but there's still that last big hump that I think American soccer needs to get over. So hopefully through success on both national teams over these next few years, and then how the organizations promote it and market it could be huge for Rams in the future. So,
Right. Just like you mentioned, there's gonna be so much soccer, international soccer this summer, with the women's U20 World Cup in Colombia, the Euro Cup, Copa America here in the United States. What do you think that all those events the development in soccer here in America will do? What impact do you think all those soccer tournaments will have for the development of players here in America, especially as we move on to 2026 with the World Cup being here in the United States?
Yeah, I think the more eyes we can get on the sport from a television standpoint is huge. And I don't, I'm not trying not to give you like a cop out answer, but yeah, but for example, the Premier League, right? 10 years ago, the Premier League wasn't a featured spot on any morning, on CBS or NBC, on a Saturday or Sunday morning, but it is now, right? Like during season, I come down, we're getting ready for a Saturday game. I put the TV on. Guess what's on TV? The Premier League, right? And having that kind of exposure, rare, here in America, is how sport grows, right? That's wildly successful. Is the market and the media exposure that they get is all consuming. It literally is 24/7 news cycle for the NFL, which I imagine exactly the scenario in Europe or in the UK. It's a 24/7 news cycle, all things football for them, right? So, and where I'm going with that, with all these, big competition going to be going on over this summer, and then with the World Cup in a few years' time, that exposure, you know, from a television standpoint or the streaming applications is huge, and having access to that real time is huge. And then also, just the ease of access to it, it just goes a long, long way, because that just was the case 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, yeah, the MLS was there, didn't have the same TV rights, and they're competing with, the big four here in America, and really good, and the quality of the sport is really good. Just weren't seeing that 10 years ago on TV, but now we are. Right now we get to see the Premier League, and sometimes Series A, and then also too, there's Liga MX. Sometimes I throw that on the TV too, and there's good football there. Club America, Chivas, all the big clubs, especially here in California. There's a lot of that going on. So I think that's just being able for young players to consistently see that and relate to that. It gives them something more to chase after. Whereas a lot of our youth, they only, from when me and you were growing up here in America, like, you didn't see any soccer. Like, no one's like, oh my God, I want to be like this person, because you didn't see that every Sunday.
Yeah, no.
Right? You saw American football every Sunday, or you saw basketball 3 nights a week, or if you're interested in baseball, you see that on TV all the time. But nowadays, more and more soccer, you can find soccer on TV almost any day of the week, whether it's the USL, the MS, the MLS, or the National Women's Soccer League, and then also the Premier League and Series A, or League MX. You can, if you want to find it, it's on TV now, and that's, I think, is what is going to continue to drive the growth. I will say I'm not a big fan of MLS and the Apple Pass. I think that sucks. If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I want to pay for another app. I already paid Apple streaming app. Don't make me buy a season pass on top of that.
Yeah.
But so I, consider that. But nonetheless, it's just more eyeball screen, and it gives kids something to continue to chase after too. And I think that's huge.
Right. So with all that exposure, like you mentioned, right? All the exposure, all that increased interest and opportunities that the 2026 World Cup will bring, how are you preparing your players and your team to take advantage of that interest and opportunities that will come?
To be perfectly honest, in terms of 2026 World Cup, I haven't thought about that. I've been so focused on this team and just trying to get ready over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't got that far, but me and my assistant coach, we have talked about team building activities, and one of the things we had listed was like doing a Premier League day, or some other type of game. We're gonna go watch. We have it scheduled July 26. We want to go and watch the newest expansion team for the Women's Soccer League,
Okay.
in San Jose. We're going to go to one of those games. So we feel that there's value in trying to connect to these leagues,
Mm-hmm.
getting them in the sport at a higher level, especially now, because in 11v11 last year was the first year this team was in 11v11. So we certainly see the value in trying to those connections, those parallels, who potentially could be their role models and players that they can develop connections with. So I could see that continuing to evolve as we lead up to the World Cup, but that's a little bit of ways from now. So I think we'll probably a little bit more when the Olympics get rolling, on trying to get them involved and rooting for the women's national team on that front, and then seeing how we can get that into whether it's a game night or breaking down having the players break certain possession or certain moments in a game, have them watch it, bring their analysis and talk about it, go about it. But we're going to try and take advantage of it as much as we can.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It'll be a great opportunity. So would you just watch the game, or would you have them like analyze it even like after?
Yeah, so I think depending on the game, right? If there's like a real important game, whether it's a game out of the group stage or semifinal or title game, just want them to watch it and enjoy it. But maybe there'll be a moment afterward to go back and rewatch,
Okay.
assuming that it's available. And then, whether it's a positional assignment, like, for my center back, like, hey, why don't you watch this moment of the game, 20 minutes, watch your position. We know what you saw. Take three things they did well, two things they didn't so well, and one thing that you have to learn on. Given them type of an assignment, a 3-2-1 assignment. Uh, that's how I'm going to do my analysis of players. That 3-2-1 methodology. Again, three things they did well, two things that they need to improve on, and one thing that they like to incorporate in their game. So that would probably be something like that, or it could be, that if we're in a moment in our season we're struggling from a defensive standpoint, whether it's defending as a back four, defending as a unit, or getting compact. There might be a couple moments in the game where the team got scored on, the U.S. women's team got on, and maybe you assign them, hey, analyze each moment that just analyze those moments. Where did the breakdown start? Did it start from the build out? Did it start from piece? Where failure points happen that lead to the goal? Because sometimes, in your third and you lost the ball, you didn't recover back on defense quick enough, and it led to a counterattack, and then it led to a goal, right? So it's getting them to realize, how it's happened and how you can translate that to your game. That's like, or at least that's how I envision it. So,
Gotcha. Um, what changes would you like to see in the youth soccer development programs here in the United States?
yeah. Um, I think right now there not enough marketing exposure
Okay.
from U.S. soccer as a whole of the programs that they have out there. So I told you in the beginning of this interview, I stumbled across it myself, trying to find my own learning. No one had told me, I didn't even know it existed, had no idea. And again, like I said, best $25 I've so far to date in 10 years of coaching soccer. And some people might, but a lot of these coaches are getting into this because they're the only ones willing to step up and volunteer. And so I think the challenge right now is for those coaches that are willing to step up and give their time, which, we've all heard the adage, time, money, time is valuable, right? It's a finite thing. We don't have a lot. It's not guaranteed. And anything we spend, we don't get back. Right. So it's how, as from a US soccer standpoint, and I don't think it's a fault of everybody, every recreational program, every system needs to do of education, because the player environment can only be good. People that are leading it are good, and they have the right talking points, to have the right mind. And I think the resources are, well, I think they're out there, but they're not provided. And they're not always, people don't always know. And you mentioned this earlier too, when I'm here on the weekends out in our club, I see other youth coaches. I literally, I've U.S. soccer, like, give me your phone number. And I find it on U.S. soccer and I send them the link. Go take this course and thank me later. Like, that should be coming from the club, right? And,
Yeah.
I think clubs should, I really think U.S. soccer needs to make that grassroots course free.
Okay.
Also too, I mean, like, why $25? Like, it's your your play, practice, play. Like, do you really need that $25? Probably not,
Yeah.
right? And it's such a huge value. Sets the tone, and it makes such a huge difference if coaches understand that there's so much more value in just setting out a couple mini goals, and then just letting them play upon right and practice for the first 10-15 minutes, and then having a couple coaching points and letting them go back at it again, and then just focusing on one activity in the main session, and then bringing that home at the final session with another play session. Like, it makes their lives so much easier, and I guarantee better results than whatever they were going to do prior to that. So just U.S. soccer, make that free. Understand why the decor is expensive, and I understand why the seat. I understand why those licenses are expensive, because there's a lot of resources put into that. It's
Hmm.
not just a one and done course. And I think the D course was $450. But what did I get out of that $450? I got a weekly Zoom session over 12 weeks. So that was an hour of a Zoom session, and then 2 in-person weekends. I got a ton of content, and the instructor has to get paid. So $450, when you average that out, like that's to me, that is money well spent. And the C course is even more, because I was looking at the C course. It's 80 plus hours of the course. So, and I think it's $1,600 for the course. Hours of coursework, uh, 4 in. There's a ton of content and structure in there. Like, that has to be paid for through somewhere.
Right.
Somebody has to be paid to do the instruction of this. So I get the cost behind that. It's no different than teachers, right? I mean, they get paid. So it's there's going to be a cost. But again, to answer your question again, just to bring it home, U.S. soccer programs, all club coaches, all club DOC, find a way to make that grassroots part of the sign up process, and at your grassroots courses, just have every coach take it or pay for it for them if US Soccer
Okay.
go a long way in the development of our youth players and keep them engaged in the game longer than eventually quitting. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So we got to start wrapping it down because we've been here for almost an hour, a little over an hour.
sounds good.
Uh, what message would you leave or piece of advice would you leave to our listeners as they continue their own coaching journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think stay humble, continue the learning journey. As coaches or leaders, finished product, and it, it set the you always talk, you'll hear a coach speak of, be coachable. Well, coaches need to take that advice too, right? They need to be coachable, and they need to listen to not only their players, but sometimes their parents and their peers. And they should continue to try build on and continuing to learn. Um, so being consistent, a consistent message for your players and parents and those around you, important to settle nerves and to gain, or, those are 2 things that I would leave them with.
Okay.
And those are things that I sort of hold myself standard, and that I always do, whether it's work or in coaching, and then just realizing we're not always going to get it right. And that's okay. That's part of the learning process, both for coaches and players. And being comfortable with that and not getting too hard on yourself. So that's what I would say.
Okay. One of my other guests on here, Coach John Barata, he works with it's an instructor for the U.S. Federation. He said the same thing. Like, you gotta be coachable. Like, be open to feedback, and the same thing that you're pretty much saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and we learn that in our D lesson, right? Like when that video analysis of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it's very eye-opening. And then also to go out there and see what other coaches are doing. I went and watched multiple coaches, watch their sessions and a little bit, and it gives you a sense of confidence too, especially when you just like, okay, my sessions are different than this, and these are
Yeah.
doing it a long time. I'm very similar stuff, but other ways they go about a certain activity or on, or maybe they have a couple keywords that they use that you really like, and you take those notes and you take it away and you put that in your coach's book. And again, it's be wanting to learn out there, not just the players. And I think when you have that kind of mindset, it just really sets the tone for all. It's easier said than done. We're not always going to be good days. But if you approach that mindset more often than not, the results are going to be positive.
Absolutely. Yep. So as you reflect on your coaching journey, what legacy do you hope to leave behind for your players and your community as well?
Yeah, legacy for players. I really, I want them to be able to look back and see that they had a coach that cared about their interest development. And hopefully when I run into them, years down the road, there's a smile when they see and they're not running and turning the other direction. Um, I just want them to on their journey with me as one that was a positive moment in their life, whether it was and then hopefully if I've done my job correctly, that there's life lessons to be learned as well, that I hope to prepare players for. Because I think I can add a lot of it just through my own, professional life and just own upbringing. And I think as coaches that there's a synergy there that we try to work to real, have, being coachable and being a good teammate, all those after sport in the real world. So hopefully, they take those learnings from that. So that's the legacy that I hope to the player side is just truly around development and that they enjoyed their time. And it was the
I'm sorry, it's I think it's
what was the other part to that question?
your community as well.
Community. Yeah, it's just giving back. I mean, it's as simple as that part. I actually did. I was a board president on a nonprofit cycling club community, and it's work, to participate in clubs and programs that you're not always getting paid for, or you're donating your time, and it's just and continuing to grow in that aspect. Like I mentioned, this last year when I was volunteering, at the club and on, watching the rec games, I try when I give back, I want to help those uh, avoid some of the struggles that I had early on in my coaching career. So that's really how I intend to give back. I've even mentioned it to my DOC, like, hey, whenever there's time and dust settles, maybe there's opportunity to set up like a rec coaches, like coaches meeting before the season kicked off to go over practice play, things like that. So there's things that I hope to provide, from a coaching community standpoint, that aren't set in stone yet, but things that I would like to, some ambitions that I have to get after, once things get more settled on coaching front and my team and things like that, and there's a little bit more time that I can. But eventually, that's I'm still young, right? I got a lot. Well, I hope I have a lot of time. But those are that I would like to chase out to kind of go over those things.
Okay. What's next for you, Coach Shawn?
Yeah, so first season, head coach, competitive coach. So the next point and mission for me at this point is, make sure that we have a successful season. And success can look a lot of different ways. The piece is key for me. You know, I don't want to say winning's not important. Of course it is. It matters. The parents want to see people. I think there's a winning component there that we achieve. Um, my team mission is development, and then love of the game. And if I can fulfill those three key principles, that'll be huge for me and my team environment. That's really where all my focus is right now on this next season. And then coaching knowledge, like I mentioned, next is after my C license. So continuing to learn education and then developing the team. Like those are what's front and center right now. All my focus is on that.
Okay. Well, best of luck to you. Where can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, so there's two different Instagram pages. There's Instagram, which is Shawn _ soccer. Then we have our team page, which is Ajax 2011 girls white team, which is our development team. So we're on Instagram, but team, and then my page. can find us. It's actually a new Instagram page. So
Okay.
yeah, if you guys can go and look for the girls, follow and stay tuned on how it goes, and hopefully it'll be a successful one.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put it on the show notes right there so they can follow you on there.
Yeah, all
The
the
next couple
links.
of questions I have for you are kind of like silly questions, all right? So the first one I have is if you could have any superpower to help you coach, which one would it be?
Oh, read the players' minds.
Okay.
100%. Yeah. Like, what were you thinking there? What did you see? What was your thought process? Yeah, 100% reading players' mind. So that's an easy one.
Anything about that? If you could swap places with any other coach for a day, who would it be?
Hmm, that's a good. Well, I might have said Jurgen Klopp, but he's not coaching.
Okay.
So I'm gonna probably go with Pep, just because I mean, obviously he's at the pinnacle of the sport right now and in the profession.
Okay.
So I think you would be silly not to want to to see what a day in the life looks like for him, or what's going through his mind, and how he looks at the game, which is probably like, I imagine, like, you've seen those memes where there's like all these numbers and equations going on in the background. Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of how it's how I envision what's probably going on his head, in
Okay.
his head with tactics and X's and O's. Um, but yeah, no, I think that would be fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. If your team had to compete in a completely different sport for a day, which sport would you choose?
That's a good one. Hmm, probably volleyball.
Okay.
Every once in a while, just for the sheer fact that I think some of them actually enjoy playing volleyball. And sometimes when they're goofing off, they turn the soccer ball into a volleyball. So they seem to have a natural knack for that sport, or interest. So yeah, volleyball.
Okay. This is the last one I've got. What's the most embarrassing moment you've had as a coach?
Oh, geez, that's an interesting one. Uh, I don't know if it's super embarrassing, but and this probably goes to my lack of playing ability. But I know, so we practice on turf, um,
Okay.
and I don't always wear turf shoes. I just wear, like, standard Puma shoe. And there was a moment where I was trying to demonstrate a skill, and I ended up just completely falling flat on my butt. Just kind of, feet went out from underneath me. I think I tried to plant too hard and just totally ate it in front of everybody. Everybody got a good laugh at my expense, which is fine. It's all good. But yeah, it was a silly moment. Just kind of one of those deals that happens, but it's
Right.
all good.
It happens, right?
Yep, totally.
All right. Well,
So.
thank you, Coach Shawn, for being here on this podcast.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and I'll continue to follow. And best of luck to you on your journey in doing this. And thanks for setting it up.
Yeah. No, thank you.
All right, take care.